My name is Julie Pearson, Little Thunder. Today is November 21st, 2011, and I'm at the Cheyenne Arapaho Tribal Complex interviewing artist Gordon Yellowman. Gordon, you've worked for the CNA Tribe in Culture and Heritage and Education. You're an adjunct professor at Southwestern State University, and you have important ceremonial and leadership roles in your tribe. But you're also an artist, perhaps best known for your ledger art. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
You're welcome.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Clinton, Oklahoma at the Indian hospital there. I grew up in Watauga, Oklahoma.
What did your folks do for a living?
My dad worked for the Pioneer Telephone Company. He was what you call a linesman. He would climb telephone poles and he would be laying new lines across western Oklahoma. And my mother served as a teacher's aide for the public schools there.
Did you spend very much time around your grandparents?
Yes, from what I remember, I really was fortunate to be able to learn from my grandmother as well as my grandfather. My grandmother's name was Mary Alice Enlow. Yellowhawk, and then my grandpa was Fred Yellowhawk, Hiwiano. And so my grandmother was a beadworker, but a ceremonial lady as well. And so I was very fortunate to be able to spend time with her during the summer, as well as my grandfather, who I'm named after. He gave me his Cheyenne name, Hiwiano.
You're fluent in Cheyenne, is that right?
Depends on fluency. I can understand more than I can speak, but as I learn, I'm currently serving as a director of the language program for the tribes, and it's starting to come back, the memory of talking Cheyenne as well as talking Arapaho, because my father was fluent and my mother was fluent. Father was Cheyenne and my mother was Arapaho.
What is your earliest memory of seeing art?
My earliest memory of seeing art is I'm going to tell you a story of how it all began. We all went to my grandmother's house in this wintertime when it was snowing. And she gave us this Big Chief tablet and pencils. And she said, "You boys quit jumping on the beds and quit running around. Come to the kitchen table and draw." So we all sat at the table, and of course everyone's all looking at each other trying to see what we're drawing. And I was about, I would say 13 years old, and when I was introduced to that tablet by my grandmother. And so for me, I didn't want my siblings, my brothers, to see what I was drawing. So I get up and I go to the window, snowing, and I look out and I see the corral of our horses. And in there is the young yearling, the baby horse that's with the mom, so I start sketching the horses. And then when I was so excited because I drew them horses. And so I couldn't wait to get home to tell my mom and dad. I was all excited and I ran in and I showed them my Big Chief tablet with my drawing on it. And I said, Mom, Dad, look what I drew. And their response was no, you didn't. And I felt like a balloon losing its air. And so I just kind of didn't know how to respond to that. I was disappointed. But little did I know that later on I realized that was their challenge. Mm-hmm. They challenged me to prove to myself to keep drawing. And then after that, so to speak, the Big Chief tablet was my very first introduction to ledger art, because that's where ledger artists start drawing in these journals, these ledger books that the Army officers had. And so I can relate to that story of the paper being introduced to them as a new medium. Mm-hmm. And so it was introduced to me by my grandmother, Mary.
Did you have any extended family members who were artists?
My dad was quite an artist. He always doodled around and did sketches, and I remember one time he was good at cartoons, and he was always I remember seeing a dictionary where he would draw animals in a dictionary, and if the animal wasn't complete, he would finish the drawing, and so I never saw him paint or never saw him draw. I mean, like produce drawings, but he was always doodling. And on my mom's side, there was a gentleman by the name of Wayne Arthur. He was very, very good at drawing. And he was my mom's relative on the northern side. And he came one winter and stayed with us. And he would always draw. I remember this so vividly and clear is because in December, the National Finals Rodeo always came on. And he would draw those ropers, those bull riders, those bareback riders, the saddle bronc. It's just amazing how he could draw them, and I'd always sit down and tell him, draw the bull rider, draw the bareback, and he would sketch it in paper. And so it was there that I started admiring what he was doing, how he drew to make it come alive. And not only, I just admired him for that. And so I couldn't wait for him to come back to the next visit and I kept some of them drawings, and throughout the years they were misplaced. And so he's the one that had a lot like influence on making me sketch every day.
Because that was kind of action. He was doing some action.
He was doing action.
It's
just amazing how such a photographic memory of all the action. And the horse again, the horse was very important to not only the Cheyenne people, but Arapaho as well as Plains people. And that horse was there when I looked out the window.
Mm-hmm. And am I right that you kind of took your signature, your artistry mark is a horse now?
Now, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My signature mark is the horse because of the icon of how I draw it. It's kind of has my own, so to speak, trademark, and I can identify that's my horse because of the way I draw it. And there's always, something that will tell you as a collector or a person that knows my art that is my work.
Sherman Chattleson's grandma kept one of those Kiowa calendars, and he saw that when he was really young. I was wondering if you saw any ledger art at a young age or not.
Not really. The only thing that I remember seeing is as I said, my grandmother was a bead worker. She made moccasins, and she made different types of beadwork. And one of the things I remember her is she had this strip of buckskin, and it had all her designs on it, all her beadwork designs. I don't know if there was a specific name for it, but every beadworker had that piece of canvas or buckskin with their moccasin designs, their dress designs, their shirt designs, their men designs, women designs, animal designs. And so that was where I was introduced to seeing images of art.
Right, and geometric.
Yeah, geometric. Yeah. And so for me, as far as ledger, throughout my career in repatriation work, with this new law that came about, NAGPRA, in 1990, I was the first Cheyenne representative to do repatriation and represent the tribes and going out to various museums, national museums. So I went to Denver and looked at the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers ledger book, and that was quite inspiring to me. And then I also looked at the Fort Marion ledger artists there, and that was the beginning of ledger art for how they were documenting history, but actually telling real life stories and history of what they experienced and what they missed. as a culture, as a people. And so then I went to New York and looked at ledger books there. So I started looking at ledger books through my work and started to study it, and started interpreting these stories of what they were saying, and starting to find out that they're actually historical accounts that reflect not only their experiences but Cheyenne history.
Yeah, and I want to come back to that a little bit too. When you were in primary and middle school, in public schools, I guess, was there any art instruction, or up through high school, do you remember taking any art
I
classes?
never took any formal art. I just really kind of like, what do I want to say, doodled around, never took it serious. And it's just something that I always thought was, challenged by my parents, to keep doing it. And I did, but it was like I wasn't doing it for, back then I was just doing it for $1 here, $1 there, sell something. But my very first, I'll tell you a story about how I started. I didn't take any formal education in grade school, junior high. And so then I left. I went to Idaho during my high school freshman year, 8th grade, transitioning to freshman. And so I went to Idaho, and I lived in Rigby, Idaho for a year, and I learned to drive truck there. I was very young, and I worked at the potato sellers. And I had to drive the trucks through the cellars and load them, and then drive them to the fresh pack, they called it. And one of the drivers didn't show up one day. And so the boss man comes down there and he says, "You don't have to drive the truck through the cellars." Didn't know anything about driving big trucks and stick shift. And he gave me a crash course. And that's where I learned how to drive these big trucks. And so after that experience, and I got lonesome and said, well, I want to go back home to Watauga. And so it was entering into the 10th grade, high school. I befriended this white girl. And she was pretty. Of course, you see her, you get there. And she came, and when I first went back to school, she came and talked to me. And she was the president of the class. And so I admired her for coming over and talking to me, because she made me feel like, she made me feel good as a student. And so she came and sat by me, and of course, her being a white girl, not me, a Cheyenne, it made me feel like she was listening or acknowledging me than my own peers and friends. And so I had to transition into high school, and then became acquainted with her, and it was my junior year where she was the president of the play. They put on the play in the high school, and I can't remember what it was. But she said, "Hey, I got a favor to ask you." And so I said, "Sure, what is it?" Kind of like, "Yeah, I'll do something for you, as a friend." And she said, "I need you to make my props for our play." And she said, I know you draw, and I've seen you draw." So I said, "Sure." So her and I we got to spend a lot of time together, so it was like, wow, I'm around her. And so you know how that goes.
Right.
So we go down and we collect cardboard boxes. And I painted cars, I painted their backdrop with the windows, everything they needed. And I painted a horse, and everything they needed for their play, I did it out of cardboard. And so when the art teacher, who at that time was Judy McCombs, she was the high school art teacher. And she came down there when we were working on the set, and she stopped there. She looked and she said, she asked my friend, "Where did you get these props? Where'd you buy these props?" And she said, "I didn't buy them. I was sitting in the auditorium waiting on her, and I was sitting there, and she pointed at me. He did it." And she came right over there, and she grabbed me by the arm, and she said, "You're going with me." And I thought, "Oh, I'm in trouble. I shouldn't have done that." And so we marched down to the office, and I thought I was in trouble. And she said, "I'm enrolling you in my art class for next year, your senior year. Why haven't you enrolled in junior? Why haven't you enrolled in 9th, 10th, and 11th? And why haven't you?" I said, "Because I felt like no one cared about my art. No one appreciated it. So I just never took formal art." So that senior year, she gave me a little corner in the area classroom, and she blocked me off from everybody. And so when she took me to the office, I felt like, oh, I'm an Indian, and she's going to get me in trouble again. Or she's going to blame me for something, being around these white girls or something. That's how it was back then. And it was very hard to befriend girls that weren't of your race, and it just wasn't unheard of. So that year, my senior year, all I did was produce art. And she said, "Just draw and paint, draw and paint." And then she lived a mile from me, and I would run out of supplies sometimes, and I would walk over to her house, and she'd give me paper, give me whatever I needed to keep drawing. And so it's very, she's the one that really began my formal art career and how to draw, and got me in an art class. And then that year I was recognized. I got an award for my art, a high school student. And I admire her for taking me into that office and enrolling.
That's wonderful. Were you painting any Indian subject matter, or was it just...
I was just kind of painting anything I could. I painted acrylic paintings, and I painted, back then the black light was very popular.
Yeah.
And so I did neon colors, black light colors on felt. And I started drawing posters of bands back then, Grand Funk Railroad, Mott the Hoopoe. All of those bands, I would draw them and paint them, and then I'd sell the posters in school. And so $10, $5, and back then I would use the money to buy me more paints, and buy me more brushes, and buy me more canvas. And back then, you didn't have stretch canvas. You just had board canvas, and I would have to buy my own felt just to stretch it and paint a poster, and then put a black light under it. And it was like, wow.
That's cool. You went to OSU briefly.
Yeah, well, I started, my next step in my education was back in the 87, I started working for the Cheyenne tribes in 1979 under the CEDAR program. And then it was called Comprehensive Educational Training Act. And I started working right out of high school from 78 to 79 for a year. And then the tribes picked me up after the program ran out. And then in 87, I started out as a janitor, mopping floors, sweeping and vacuuming hallways, and emptying trash cans. And then in 87, I said, I need to do something with my art. I can't be a janitor all my life. So then I went back to school at Canadian Valley Votech, and it was a commercial and graphic art program, and I finished that. It was a 2-year program, and I finished it in 1 year. And that year I was voted the Outstanding IT Student of the Year out of all the students. And then Oklahoma State University gave me a tuition waiver scholarship, and that's where I went. And then it was Oklahoma City Extension OSU school there, and they didn't have any art classes. They just had architectural. And so the tuition was paid for me free. So I went, and I went there from 1989 to 92. Spent 2 years there. And then I went on from there, and then I came back to work as a consultant because learning how to do illustration design work there on illustration boards. I design schematic designs of how the building was going to look at the end of when it was built.
You had that architectural, a little bit of that architectural
and I
background.
loved it. I loved it because what I learned at OSU is I learned how to do things shortcut. The way I was doing them before it was taking longer, and they taught me how to cut that in half. And so that's where I learned how to do floor plans. I had to learn how to draw houses, design houses from perspective drawings all the way to specifications of a house. And so I love doing designs for illustration board work, and that's where I got watercolor. And watercolor was, I enjoyed it because it was fast. I didn't have to wait. On acrylic and oils, you have to wait till it dries. Or when you're applying, you can't hardly work with it as you can. And you can't control watercolor. It controls you, but you just never understand. You understand. It's fast, and so I loved it. And that was my education at Oklahoma State University, and loved that school. And then I learned how to design houses, write specs. So I came back to work for the tribes as a consultant for the housing program, and I eventually became the housing director.
When did you make your first venture into Indian art shows?
Well, when I first started going out of high school, I went to different small shows. I went to the very first Watonga Cheese Festival, and I got best of show there in first place. And
was it for Indian subject matter?
No, it was open categories, and Indian subject matter for me it was always there. I always sketched Indian things, whether they were political statements or back then everything was about aim. Aim, better red than dead, those kind of statements. And it's like in high school that was kind of the trend and the movement that was going on. And it was a very powerful movement, but it's kind of something like you would sit there and read the messages, but also would stay back as an artist to, how can I use my art to visualize and express how I truly feel about, what's going on with the situation now versus the expression through my art. So that's how I took it. I would draw things, say for instance, the Vietnam War. I would draw things of that was images of that era, and turn it into Indian. And so that statement that I would draw was kind of transitioning from that era into the movement of the American Indian movement, which was we were actually living with it in that time. So Indian art could have been humorous at that time, could have been political, could have been humorous, but it was a pop culture at that time. That's why I had the black lights and the neon paints. It was that type of movement that I admired because of the colors. It was a very powerful, color to mess with. And that's what I enjoyed about it, seeing that color come out at you of that time.
How and when did you meet your wife, Connie?
Well, I met Connie through working for the tribes. She was working in planning department as a grant writer, and I was working on art projects for the planning department. I had to draw the tribal service area and all the original allotments. I was working on a mapping project, and she was sort of the program specialist at that time, and then she came in. They said, we want you to draw these maps, because back then they didn't have computer, and they knew I had architectural training. I could read the architectural scales, and I understood scales, quarter inch equals a foot, or half inch equals a mile. I could do all of that, and everything was done freehand on illustration boards. So I produced the very first map for the tribes on the tribal service area, and I researched all of the original allotments, and I drew them. I drew them to scale. And so Connie, at that time, she came to me. I had no idea what budgets really were, and she said, how much time is it going to take you to draw this? And I said, oh, I don't know. I could spend 1 hour a night, I could spend 2, I could spend all night. I said, I don't know, I can't tell you that. She said, well, what do you need to produce this? And I said, well, why are you asking these questions? She said, because we got monies to buy you the stuff you need that you're going to do. I said, oh, okay. So she bought all of the supplies, and that was kind of our working relationship had begun, because she would help me do the research and then tell me what she wanted, and then the end product was the maps. And so I told her how the technical illustration pens back in architectural pens were very expensive, and so I was very careful about the quality of the supplies. And so that's where we met. And then that summer, 2 years later, she made a vow to put up sundays and get involved in our Cheyenne ceremonies, start really, being acquainted with one another and supporting one another, not only through work, but on the personal side of it, because it transitioned over to, this is serious, and I had to respect one another at that level of what she was carrying and what my role was at that time, and it still is to this day. And so that's how we began our relationship. And right after that, she goes to the University of South Dakota as a law fellowship. She was a Native American law fellow for a year, and that's when she spent a year up there teaching law, researching law. And then after she came back, then that's when we really started getting serious about our relationship, and then we eventually got married. And so then we had our daughter, Cricket. That's where I first met her, was there at the planning.
It's really neat how all of this work experience, a lot of it threads back into your artwork. And of course, Connie does beadwork also. So when you started doing booth shows, what was that like? Did you exhibit together a fair amount of time, or did you often?
Again, it was when she went to South Dakota. We went up there in August, maybe July. I think it was July, to go look for an apartment. And we went up there and we found her an apartment, and then it was that winter that she wanted to learn quill work. So she made contact with some of the elder ladies there, the Sioux ladies, and they showed her how to do it and showed her how to do it. And so that during the winter, that's all she did quill work, to teach herself how to do it. And then she already knew the beadwork. She did the beadwork, learned the beadwork from the Clinton grandmothers. And so while she was there for that year in South Dakota, that's all she did. And so when she started coming back, she started making different pipe bags, cradle boards, soft cradles, and different quilt work materials. And then I finally told her, why don't you come to Red Earth? My very first time entering Red Earth was in '94. And the first year I did it alone, and then the second year I said, let's apply together. And so she applied with me, and we both got accepted. We enjoyed having the boot together. And she won awards, and I won awards. And so we just kind of supported each other through her beadwork, quilt work, and then she supported me through the paintings and the drawings I was doing, ledger drawing style. I had to create my own ledger style because to be, so to speak, different from other ledger artists.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that. I guess the ones that come to mind are Sherman Chattelson and Sharon Otto and Harjo did a bit of ledger work. How did you approach yours to make it?
I didn't have any idea how I was going to do it. And so I started experimenting with it, getting different paper, ledger paper. And then I would find ledger books, or somebody would give me blank pieces of paper, and someone said you have to what I want to say, use color pencils. So I started using Prismacolor because I was introduced to Prismacolor at Oklahoma State University. And so they taught me how to use Prismacolors, and I learned that. And so I started to say, well, I'm going to do watercolor. So then I transitioned into, instead of doing the Prismacolor, I started painting these paintings of ledger work. And that's when I realized, hey, I can do this. It's my own style. It's contemporary, using contemporary style, creating your own style, but still historically following what they follow. And in researching ledger art, all of the Cheyenne work goes from right to left.
Are you a Fort Marion descendant?
Yes, my grandfather was there, and we're related to everybody. Many of the Cheyenne Arapaho people are related to the Fort Marion, and it all kind of, the lineage kind of comes down and expands to immediate family and also family in general. So somewhere there's a connection there with the prisoners of war. And so what I want to say is I commend them for having such a vast knowledge of history and documenting it through art, ledger art.
Yeah, I was really struck, and I don't know if it's just been the ones that I've seen, but it seems like a lot of the ledger work was done by Cheyenne prisoners.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back a little bit to your first visit to the Colorado Historical Society. Is that right? Where you first began, you went for NAGPRA, but then you started looking at the ledger work. Was there any surprises for you when they brought, I guess, the first ledger books out for you to look at? Anything surprise you?
It was very surprising and exciting to see it, because knowing that ledger book was produced by the dog centers, Hidama Daniel, Tall Bull, White Horse, those leaders back then, they were very prominent, strong leaders in that society, strong leaders of Cheyenne. And so to know that it was produced by them and telling their story, seeing the art, but also seeing a vivid picture of history, of their encounters with the Army, their encounters with the white man. It was very powerful in its own, but to hold it in your lap and look in it and hold it and see those images of history, that was very powerful. It was very, so to speak, me as an artist and them as an artist connecting with one another, not only through pages of time, but pages of art, but also expressing their message and interpreting that piece of art, what they drew. The message is encoded in there as an artist, you can see and interpret what they're saying, their actions and what they're doing. And so we had that connection as artists, and we have that connection as leaders. And so it was powerful for me to hold it and see it. And I had to wear white gloves, you know, and it's like, you know, it's all about standards in museum practice. And so there's a story about what I tell about the white gloves when I started working with repatriation. And one of the things that when I very first did consultation with the Cheyenne elders, Mary Armstrong, Willie Fletcher, and also Annabelle Medicine Chips, Bertha Little Coyote. All of those elders are gone. I took them to Sam Noble, Oklahoma Museum of Natural History in Norman. And when I get there, I told them, I said, you got to wear these white gloves. And they said, why? And I said, well, that's standard policy, but before you handle objects or artifacts, or you got to protect yourself and protect the object. There's acid built up on your fingers, and you know, your fingerprints could get on the object. And I said, these objects have been treated, some of them chemically, and so we don't want the poisons to get on us. I said, so these gloves are our white sage. Mm. We use our sage to purify ourselves before we work anything we do. And I said, so these gloves are that sage. And they said, oh, okay. So they put them on, and that was it. And so I had to be creative in transitioning the traditional value versus the museum value of how they doing it, how they did that. And so I always remember that story about the white gloves, how I had to be creative. And then when we started the video camera recording, they said, what is that? I said, well, when we look at an object, it's going to spark your memory. And you're going to start telling stories about your grandmother, your mother, or perhaps yourself of what you know about that object. And it sparks your memory. And I said, this video camera is the white man's memory. And I said, oh, okay. So that was it. You know? I had to be creative again in explaining and making them comfortable and accepting that it was okay. And so, you know, that was my work in NAGPRA, learning how to be creative.
So once you had seen that ledger art at the Historical Society, you also looked at it at the Denver Art Museum and then at the Smithsonian?
Yeah, the Denver Art Museum, they had contemporary ledger art.
Oh, I see.
Done by contemporary ledger artists.
Oh, okay.
And that's where I learned. I looked at theirs, and then very powerful, colorful. And one thing there that certainly caught my eye was the parasols.
Parasols?
Yeah, the umbrellas.
Yeah.
And that's when I started drawing the parasols and umbrellas, incorporating it into my ledger art. So.
Who were a couple of the artists that you particularly thought did a good job?
There was a lady at the Denver Art Museum who had one drawing, and I can't remember her name right off the bat, but her colors were so bold, and the umbrellas, and the way she drew the horses, that I remembered that one painting in your collection at that time on the wall. And so I marked that. And then as far as artists, that like the dog soldier artists, when the more you study ledger art, you can kind of start seeing how you can start determining who the artist style was, because one artist drew a horse different from the other. And so you start to recognize through looking at and studying these ledger drawings, you're starting to see a consistent pattern of, oh, that may be drawn by white horse. Oh, that might be drawn by tall bull. And so you start to see there's no signature on it other than name glyphs but the name glyph is identifying who's in that ledger drawing. It may not be the artist. Or could it be the artist drawn himself?
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the questions that still remain, but you can see the pattern of how the horse is drawn itself.
You know, one of the problems with the native art, sometimes when the work's created for the commercial market, is that it may be missing part of its context. And so how do you address that in your own work, your own ledger art?
Well, going back to the economics of it, you're gonna make your artwork or transition your artwork into what's selling. It can be very popular culture art, and so whatever's happening at that time, they all want to be part of that economic boom or value, and so we automatically as artists will render something that's going to reflect what's popular. In ledger art, when I first started doing it back in the 90s, I want to say 95 to 2000, was very popular. And so you were competing with everybody because everybody was doing ledger art. And so today, there's very few that are doing it, and especially Cheyenne artists. I think there's me that's doing it, James Black, Frank Sheridan, that are truly dedicated and putting our work for ledger art, and we continued it. We didn't stop. And others that were doing it, they stopped because it was just an economic time of value. Oh, well, that's not popular anymore, so I'm not going to do it. Mm-hmm. So you have to be very dedicated if you're going to do it to stick with it. And so your question is, a lot of it is, so to speak, generic. A lot of it is stereotyped. Big Chief Indian, commercial. And so the commercial of it is sending off stereotyped images, and they're not really the true image of that tribe. And so you're going to have that type of situation. And so it can be very controversial. It can be very, I'm going to say, sensitive. Mm-hmm. And it can be very disrespectful. So that's how I would enter that and see it from an artist's perspective. So we're very fortunate to be able to understand what is the true expression of that art.
In 2000, you won first place, was it in miniatures for your miniature
Yes,
ledger book?
Yeah.
How did you get the idea for a miniature ledger book?
Actually, I struggled. I was getting discouraged because I never won an award at Red Earth. I probably got honorable mention, but nothing. And so that was their first year of having a miniatures division. And so I thought, well, why can't I'm going to enter this? I'm going to turn my ledger art that I produced into a miniature. And Connie said, how are you going to do that? And I said, good question. So I found an old billfold, and I found paper, and I made my own ledger paper. And then they gave me dimensions of the qualification of a miniature. Mm-hmm. So I took those dimensions and I just condensed it into making my own. And I did 12, no, I think it's 10. It's 10 or 12, I think it's 10 pages in it.
Did you hand
reduce
when you made the ledger paper?
I hand drew all the lines of the
man.
paper, and I drew the little numbers in. And each image tells a history of my life. And so it ends with Cricket and Connie standing in the last page. standing there in their dresses.
Mm.
So it started out from my great-great-grandfather Sharpnose to Sand Creek, 1864 to Washita. And see, it highlights my grandfather Sharpnose, who was a second lieutenant at Fort Robinson in 1878. So I started there and started recording significant parts of my life and history. So that's how that's why I called it Chief Yellowman's Ledger book. And I produced it and then got in there and, you know, just kind of thought I just got to try. So I hand sewed all of the paper images into it, and I won first place on it, and I about fell over and died because it was, I didn't expect to win first place, but so I finally won it, and then that just gave me an answer that I can do this, you know. And to me, the commercialism in art is whenever I started my art, it was my getaway. It was I went into other travels, other parts of the world, other parts of time. But when it became a have-to-do thing, commercial, people demand my art, so I got to produce it and sell it. That takes the fun out of it, and it's no longer my getaway. It's no longer my escape to Never Land or dreamland of how our people were, their time zone. And so I got to the point where I get to pick and choose what I do. And it's me doing it. So artists have to be in the mood to do it. You can't just go clock in 8 o'clock and clock out 5 o'clock and say, okay, this is how many I produced. It don't work that way. You got to be in the mood to paint and draw. And every artist knows that. And so there's a little imagination tape line around me when I'm working. I zone out. I don't hear the phone ring. I don't hear the TV on. I don't hear anything. And so Connie and Cricket, they know that zone line. They can't cross into it. And that's just the rule, you know. And Cricket kind of got upset at me because one of my friends came over and she said, well, how come they get to pass the line and we can't? So it's like, well, just trying to be courteous, you know. And so they know the rule. And so sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but in the end, the whole outcome is positive, because if people are that appreciative of your art that they want to buy it, then you know that it's not just the value of that art, it's the quality. And the quality is what collectors look for. The true accuracy of what you're painting as far as an image or sending a message in that. And that's what they're buying. They're not just buying a piece of work. They're buying a piece of history. They're buying a piece of culture. And they're buying a piece of voice. But most of all, they're buying that spirit of what you're producing from that art.
In 2005, you had a show at Southern Plains Museum. Was it a combination of new paintings and older work? And I know Connie had work in there too.
Yeah, we did it as a family. Cricket did work. She was been a Red Earth award-winning artist as well, and a youth art. So we felt like we'd do it together, combine pieces. I take my artwork, ledger art. She takes her beadwork, and Cricket brings hers. I thought that was very not only convenient but honorable to have three parents and a daughter there and the show at the Southern Plains Museum, and to highlight our work. And they made these brochures and helped get our art out there to the public, but also to collectors, and making our work known at that level, national level, to be recognized at the Southern Plains Museum. That was, to me, that was awesome.
Yeah. And you've also done a couple of book covers. One was for a jumping mouse story, and the other was a book called Eagle Catcher. Were these from paintings that you did especially as cover art, or did the authors or the publishing company just see an image of yours and they thought that would be good?
It was the authors that I worked with,
Mm-hmm.
and so they want specific illustrations,
Mm-hmm.
and they want specific things of tying into their. The first book jacket I did was "You're Right, Eagle Catcher" by Margaret Cole, and so she was from the Denver. It was published by the Colorado Press out of Boulder, and so I worked with her. It was very good. It was very kind of simple. I did maybe two, what we call, one was a schematic design, and the second one was a painting that I sent because I thought she told me what she wanted, so I sent it. And then I had one modification, and it wasn't much. It was just on color.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, I got my name in the system of the publishers as an artist. The authors will say, I'm looking for this, and then they'll send you the artist's name, and then you work with the authors. So that's how I got the second one, which was Tell Me Grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And that was by Dr. Virginia Sutter. And so, and she gave me, Margaret referred her to me. And so, that one there, we worked with the publisher, and it was more difficult working with the publisher than the author. And the publisher wanted certain things, and then so I painted this very beautiful, I thought appropriate painting of Tell Me Grandmother. I painted my grandmother holding a cane, telling a story. And so she had her scarf on, had her cane, and her little dress that she wore, and I painted her, and the colors were so powerful, the images. I just knew that was going to be the cover. And so they said, no, that's not it. So then I thought, well, what is it? I kept sending different modifications, sketches, and then went back and forth for a while, and then finally I said, you know what, this is it. If this isn't going to do it, then I'll just pull myself from the project, and I can't continue to keep. So I did this painting, and then kind of changed up the colors, made it more appropriate, and so I put it in the mail, and I said, this is the final, accept it or not, mail it back. And they said, this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. Mm-hmm. And so it's ironic how the author, the publisher, then you work around each other, and then they get frustrated, you get frustrated, and then pretty soon you're just kind of more ready to throw the towel in or give up, and then it's like, this is it. So that cover turned out to be nice, and we did some little changes on it graphically. Mm-hmm. And so Tell Me Grandmother is my ledger art.
Mm. There's lots of issues involved when non-Indians paint Indian subject matter and they don't do their research, or sometimes they don't even question the appropriateness of painting certain subjects. And I know there was an incident at Santa Fe Indian Market a couple of years ago when a non-Indian artist was showing a painting of a Cheyenne dog soldier. And some CNA tribal members confronted him about that. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it was, well, first of all, you see the painting in the Indian, I think it was the Indian Art magazine. It was one of the very prominent magazines there. And so we were thumbing through it and we see it, and of course we're saying, oh, I don't know. I wonder who he is. And look at this, and it's very sensitive. It's of a image of a sun dancer, and in there it says Cheyenne sun dancer. And so he has the image of the sacred ceremonial dance that the Cheyennes we still have that on our our religious traditions and practices. It's part of our ceremony. It's our ceremony. And so, I saw it and then read it and then just kind of thought, I kind of want to meet this artist and talk to him and find out exactly why he painted it and who gave him permission to paint it and why did he paint it. And so, kind of got to that point of where I was aware of it. And then when I get out there, then I run into several artists who are Cheyenne, but also society members. And they said, we need to go over there and talk to this artist and tell him that this is sensitive and we just need to go talk to him. So I think his name was, I want to say DJ or D something Challenger.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So I said, okay, I'll meet you over there in front of that studio, the gallery where he was showing. And so he was showing there the paintings of what he did. And he wasn't in Santa Fe Indian Market because I don't think he could meet the qualifications of being accepted into the art because he's non-Indian. So then we go to the gallery where he's having an exhibition showing, and then when we get there, one Cheyenne member is already there, and then the other one shows up, and so we kind of look up and we see the painting hanging in the window, and then we kind of gather our thoughts and say, yeah, we're artists, but we really don't expose things like this that's just sensitive into our art. We know what we can and can't do. And so they felt like we needed to do something, because when we come home as Cheyennes and we were aware of it and didn't do anything about it, we would be the ones that would catch it from our people. And we would also not be fulfilling our duties and roles as chiefs and society members. So we went in together as a group, and we walked in and introduced him and signed the guest book, Cheyenne Chiefs and Headsmen. And then we called him over to the painting and went over to the front of the painting, and we looked at it and we asked him specific questions. Who gave you permission? And why did you paint it? And he said, my friend is Cheyenne. I got a good friend, he's Cheyenne. He gave me permission. And then the next question was, have you ever been to Cheyenne Sundance? And he said, no. And then we asked him if he was Cheyenne. He said, no. And so we told him, well, what gives you the right as a non-Indian, non-Cheyenne to paint this? And he said, well, I'm aware of the Sundance. I read about it. And he said, so I felt like I could paint it. And he said, what do you want me to do? And I said, well, you need to take it off display, put it in the back, just take it out of this showcase window and put it away. And I said, honor our request that way. And I said, but too, you're making money. This painting was listed at $40,000-$50,000. And I said, you're making money off of these types of paintings, and you're calling it Cheyenne when it's not produced by Cheyenne, but yet you're calling it Cheyenne to enhance the value of it to collectors. I said, so you're making money off of it, and that's inappropriate. I said, if you truly want to help our people, donate some of that money to our people, to the elder, to the youth that have needs, their general welfare needs. We got people at home suffering from illnesses. We got people at home that may not have nothing to eat right now. So if you were to turn that into a scholarship or some kind of fund to help our people, maybe we'd appreciate you trying to not just make money off of us, but give back to our people. You could help that way. And he said, well, I'll get back with you guys on it. And to this day, we never heard from him.
But he did move it.
Yeah, he did. I took a picture of it hanging in the window, which I still have. And then I'll email it to you if you want have it for your file. And I went back the next day and took the picture of the same window, and it was gone. So he did honor that request. But at the same time, when we were at the reception, when he was standing there talking to us, looking at the painting, guess what he was doing? A big bottle of beer, drinking it. And I said, that's another thing. So anyway.
You've curated a number of shows in collaboration with museums, but there was one you did with the Denver Art Museum, Cheyenne Visions 2, in which you brought together traditional work that the museum, I guess, had, museum holdings, with contemporary Native artists. Can you talk about that a little bit, how you got the idea for that?
Well, the first curation show that I had no idea what curator was or what it was like to curate an exhibit, curator show. I went to Chicago Field Museum, and there was a guy by the name of Robert Spoonhunter, the late Robert Spoonhunter. He was curating the Arapaho show, and he had died suddenly halfway through the show, putting the show together. And so I happened to go up there that summer and looked at the collections, and then Dr. Jonathan Haas, I got acquainted with him when he came through Oklahoma. He was wanting to get in touch with Cheyenne people, the Arapaho people. And so he called me and he said, hey Gordon, can you, I have a dilemma here. He said, the guy that was curating the Arapaho show, he suddenly died, and we got to finish this show. So what do you want to, give me some suggestions. And I said, well, you can probably call some of the northern Arapahos and get their guidance and suggestions. And then he said, well, I'll do that. So he didn't call me back for about 2-3 months, and he said, I haven't gotten a response. And he said, can you come finish this show for me? So I said, yeah, I'll do that. So I went up there for a week and finished the show, the Arapaho show for him. And then it went on exhibit as planned. And then he called me and then he said, I appreciate you seeing this show through. It was a success. And what can I do for you now? And I said, I want to curate my own show. So then I go to the Field Museum and I worked with the collections for 870 objects in there that are Cheyenne, somewhere around that number. And I got to see every one of them. And so I curated my own show there. I spent 2 weeks pulling collections and photographing, and I had to visualize what I was going to do. And so that was where I began Cheyenne Visions 1. And I wanted to call it Cheyenne Visions 1 because not only is it the vision of the people of our past, but it's the vision of our future Cheyennes. And I had to do it creatively and to express what I was trying to do. So that's where I did at the Field Museum with Cheyenne 1. And then the Denver Art Museum called me and said, we really like that show. Can you do Cheyenne Visions 2 here? And I said, sure. So we wrote a grant. As a matter of fact, Ben Nighthorse Campbell was involved and provided some of that grant funding through his foundation. So, and he's Cheyenne. So then I went up there and I curated that show. And then it just kind of went on its own. And I looked at the collections. I separated the women, the men's, the boys, and different society things, and then start putting together the contemporary transition of history, but contemporary Cheyennes. And we merged them together to reflect we're still a living culture. We never went anywhere. So that was my whole point, in showing them who we are as Cheyenne, our communities. We're still here as societies, we're still here as bead workers, we're still here as song people, and we're still here as ceremonial people. So we haven't gone anywhere. We're still living and breathing. And it's that culture that reflects our identity as Cheyenne people. So that was my whole goal in that. And so today I had other museums inquire, like Sam Noble out of Norman, and they agreed to be number 3. And then the National Museum of the American Indian, at that time, Rick West was the director, and he agreed to be 4. So, and who knows where it's going to go from. That was my whole point,
Right.
to make it evolve and keep going. It takes a long time to plan a show, because museums exhibits, they go on books. They're scheduled 2 to 3 years in advance. And in the meantime, you're looking for funding, or you're looking for, so their exhibits are major, and you got to be on their schedule 3-4 years in advance. So it's not just something that, oh, let's do it this year and then it'll show next year. It's not like that. I learned that.
Right.
So it's a hurry up, wait thing.
So, shifting a little bit to your philosophies and practices of art, these days is your principal media still water media?
Yeah, watercolor.
And so it's you mostly work on paper.
I
Do
work
you do
on
canvas sometimes?
Yeah, I paint on canvas just to keep the feeling. And I took a class at OU, painting class under Professor Hebelberg's, a painting class, and he said, you got to get back to painting, you got to get back to canvas. His whole point was get back to canvas, and it was 20 years since I've been painting on canvas, and it's like I had to relearn myself. I had to learn the feel and texture of it. Not only that, but the scale of it. It was frightening. I sat
The
there,
scale of it. Yeah, it's real.
I sat there and struggled with it, and Pearson, I just said, I'll just do this, And he said, just paint what you're feeling. It doesn't have to be perfect, And then my assignment was to do 4 paintings, 2 personal and 2 exploratory. So the personal ones is what got me the grade, and that came later. But all he wanted me to do was feel the paint, feel the brush, and feel the canvas. And that's what, he really made me understand what that really meant, feeling it and the texture. And so now I'm not afraid to go back to it, because I started out painting on acrylic, using acrylics. I started out painting big. So now I'm getting comfortable where I want to go back to canvas. But right now I do my ledger work on watercolor ledger and technical illustration pens and pencil, cold-pressed archival paper, 150-pound cold-pressed. And you got to understand the quality of the paper for collectors, for acid-free paper. You got to understand all of that language, and because you got to know that when a collector buys it, they're going to ask you specific questions. What's it on? Is it archivable? Is it acid-free? Is it, so you got to know all of your thicknesses and weights, and so you understand that, and then you got to understand the type of paint you're using. Is it different trades of paint? Because there's certain paints in there that's going to last longer than the other. I never knew that. There's some that may be poison. So, understanding the supplies of painters, the paints that you're actually working with, and through experience, you know which ones are good and which ones aren't. And so I know that I'm comfortable with the one I use now, and then the brushes. Back then, when I first started, I had TJ&Y camo hair brushes. And it's so frustrating, but the quality of the paint, you're gonna pay $30-$40 a brush, but it's just so, especially on a wash brush. I didn't know what a wash was. I didn't know how to do a wash, and I learned that at OSU.
And when did you take the class from Edgar?
That was in 2008.
2008.
Yeah, and I'm currently I'm continuing my education at OU,
Mm.
University of Oklahoma, and I took art history courses,
Oh,
and
I see.
anthropology courses. So I'm still in school.
You're still taking.
Yeah, and I got last couple of years I got the Rick West art scholarship.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, so the art scholarship was a way to pay for my tuition, but I was honored to be the scholarship recipient. And then I teach at the Cheyenne Tribal College since I've been there since 2005. And when they first contacted me, they said, we want you to teach this class because we want someone in there that's not only going to know the traditions of Cheyenne people, but as an artist. And we want to develop our program into providing this type of traditional arts and really understanding the history of our people to provide that to the students. So kind of unique in its own self. So this is my 6th year in teaching at the Tribal College at Southwestern.
Is it a combination history,
Yeah.
applied traditional
I
arts?
apply the arts through time,
Cool.
from rock art to buffalo hide painting, the animal itself, the animal, the hide painting. But in between that, there's a process. You got to skin the animal, you got to stretch it, you got to tan it, and then you're gonna paint them. So it's important to know all of those steps of traditional art, and you're not gonna find that in a book. It's hands-on, and so to me that's the value.
Do you do preliminary sketches before you start to work on, say, a piece of ledger art?
Yeah, everything's up here in my mind. I visualize up here, and then I'll do thumbnail sketches. And once I do a thumbnail sketch, it's down, and then I'll start doing the sketches on paper, and then I'll come in with the next step is I'll ink, and then after I ink, then I'll paint.
How important are titles to your work? Do you ever get like an idea for a title before you see that image, or?
Yeah, it depends on what the request may be. They'll tell me what they want, and then I'll produce it, and then so I'll add the
Like
title.
for a book cover,
yeah,
or
a
a
book
commission
cover
or
or a
something.
special commission, and so I've already got it up here, and I just need to put it down here. And so right now, currently, I've been commissioned to do a painting at the new Oklahoma Supreme Court building, and it's up here right now. It hasn't gone to paper, but it will here shortly.
Will it be more of a large scale painting, or?
Yeah, it's going to be a large scale painting, and they already told me what they wanted. They even took me over to see the wall of where it's going to go.
Will it be a mural?
No, it's a painting.
Oh, okay.
But they wanted me to see the color of the room.
Right.
And they wanted me to put colors that's going to reflect that room.
Right. Cool. Narrative is obviously important to ledger art, but is it more challenging to tell a story through ledger art, or realistically, do you think? Or does it just depend with a more realistic style?
I think the ledger art is probably more accurate and very simple. And you're going to have very simple designs, very simple lines, whereas a realistic one, your challenge is going to be to reflect that realistic image. And sometimes you can't really do it, because sometimes you see it as self-portraits. Sometimes you see it as an image that may be still, a still image, when in fact you're trying to express the life of it. So being simple is very important. One of the famous quotes that, less is more. And so when I see it, I try to be simplistic in what I'm saying, because if you add on more to it than it really needs, you're losing the subject matter, but you're also going on the side of what they call gaudy. You know, you're adding things on there that don't need to be on there. And so you got to be very careful of how a simple message of what you're doing in your art, but being very clear. And that bold color plus the fine lines, the contrast of them lines is very important in what makes it pop out at you as a piece of art.
We've kind of talked about your creative process a bit in the sense that, you know, once you're in the groove, you've got to protect your time if you're inside your line there. Tell me a little bit about how your creative process goes, like from the time you get an idea. Do you keep a notebook of sketches, or just kind of walk us through that?
I keep a journal, like my own personal journal of some of the contemporary things that are happening now. Like when we lose a chief, I'll write the chief's name down. I'll write some notes of what I might know that person. If there's something that like the ceremonials going on, you know, something that I do highlight that. And then if I'm gonna be sketching something, I'll definitely put down symbols. I'll sketch something that's gonna remind me of what I have up here. And it all comes out together because you got it up here, and then so you can visualize it. Like with this painting I'm gonna do with the Supreme Court building. It's up here. I envisioned the Kemp Circle, but I also envisioned the chiefs, and it's gonna be the reflecting the what we call the justice systems among the Cheyenne people. How we handle violations among our own people, violations of other enemies, violations of traditions. So some people call it restorative justice, whereas me, I'm going to call it traditional justice, because it's a system that is, traditional law is very powerful. And traditional law has existed before written law. And so that's going to elevate a higher level of dealing with the justice system. When you violate traditional law, you violate, you exceed the punishment, or the sentencing is harder for us in the traditional system than it is the civil. The white man, the law, the federal law, the Indian law, the state law, the county law, the city law. Our traditions is very high. It has a high standard. And so you've got to maintain that justice system, because a lot of that, the most punishment you can ever get and receive from that is humiliation. And understanding that. But that's how we are as people, Cheyenne people. So I'm going to apply, paint an image of that system. And there's going to be several cases in it. I've already done my research. One's going to be about the young lady that aborted her child. And the other one's going to be about one of the warrior societies that violated he went hunting when he wasn't supposed to. He didn't wait on all the warriors. He went on his own, and he paid a price for that.
Well, I look forward to seeing that.
So it's case studies
Yeah.
of our history.
Looking back on your career, what's been one of the pivotal moments, looking back on your art career, I guess, when you sort of, kind of a fork in the road moment?
I think one of the fork in the road moment was, again, losing that getaway. Losing that stress-free time to get away and just enjoy it. and yeah, today among our people, money, we have to have money to eat. We have to have money to get gas to go to work. We have to have money to pay the light bill, pay the telephone bill. So money is very important economically, that helps us live comfortably. And it's not much, but it's very, it's among us. You can't live without it. So the economic side of it was, you get discouraged because if they say, I want 12 paintings next month, you just laugh at them and say, yeah, right. So it's frustrating, but at the same time, I try to keep in mind the appreciative. People appreciate it, the appreciation of my art. It increases the value.
Right.
So that was sort of the fork in the road for me. But the other thing was meeting that fork in the road was the formal education and the informal. I saw two worlds there, and I was living one, and then I had to learn to educate, and I learned that formal education is very important, and if I can do it, and then so can others. And I want to be a model of that educational side of it too. You're never too old to learn, but education is important. Stay in school. Utilize your art, your talent, whatever it may be. Utilize your talent to exceed yourself, to make yourself a better person. And so education for me, from sitting there waiting for my senior year in high school to get recognized by an art teacher. And in fact, it's funny because it's kind of come full circle, because when I was first hired at the Southwestern Oklahoma State University Tribal College to teach art in the art department there, Joe London was the director at Southwestern. And he was dating my high school art teacher. They became friends. And he said, do you know Judy McCombs? And I said, yeah, that was my high school art teacher. So in a sense, it's like, I know she put a good word in for me.
Wow.
Thank you. So it was full circle to the education. She gave me the opportunity to enroll me, and then here, 20, 30 years later, her name comes up again. And it's like, yes, I know her. So in a sense, it's just like, she was always in my life, and she still is, and I know, if she wasn't my high school art teacher, I probably wouldn't be at Southwestern. So you think of those kind of things, you put them into understanding that how much they really saw the artistic value in what you had. They were the ones that helped you along, and it was up to you to either accept that help and run with it. And so he retired from Southwestern, and she was working, I don't know if she's still teaching there, but at the school at Chickasha, the art school there. And so it was kind of funny when he called me on the phone, and he says, oh, by the way, do you know Judy McCombs? And that was my high school art teacher.
Yeah.
And so he said, yeah, I've heard. So I've heard.
I'm dating
her. So that was kind of full circle.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a look at your paintings in a minute, but or some images that you've done. Is there anything you'd like to add, or anything we forgot to cover?
Well, one of the things that I always remember is, when you, as an artist, whether it's music, dance, song, or singing, or whatever it is, always take full advantage of that. Learn more and more about it. Study it, read. I learned to learn different expressions of art through different thinkers. And I certainly learned that at the University of Oklahoma. And so, yeah, you can add a lot to that too. You bring into that realm of education for what your knowledge is of how you produce art, how you express art. So it's not just a medium, it's a form of expression, and it's the beauty of who you are, but it's also the beauty of your people and your culture, your language. So never get discouraged. Yes, you're going to get frustrated. You get frustrated in everything you do in life, but there's always a positive that comes out of it. And when you get to that point of understanding what I'm saying about the positive, the comfortable, you've elevated and reached that goal of what you set, that's the payoff, that's the appreciation if I did it. And so never say I can't do it. Always say I am going to do it. If it's not for you as an individual, do it for your people. Do it for your family. Do it for the children that's going to learn from your art. And they're going to look up and say, you know, he did his artwork for us. And that's what I like to see. And remembering that art is a beautiful thing. It's an artistic gift that the Creator gives us. And always share that gift. Don't ever keep it to yourself. Share it. Because it doesn't just belong to you, it belongs to the people. And one of the things that, you know, I've always admired as artists is you're still doing it. And then just keep doing it. And I'll keep doing it as long as I can continue to be creative. As long as I can continue to relate a story, whether it's just through a sketch or a painting or a photograph. Because I'm starting to do photography now. I've won awards in my photography. And it's a new media, but it's starting to go that direction. And so I experiment. There's nothing wrong with experimenting. But I just want to say, I encourage all the youth to continue their education and never forget where they come from, who they are, and who their people are. And one of the things that I want to say is I certainly want to say thank you to my mother and father for challenging me and discouraging me and saying, no, you didn't. And that was their way of making me do it and do it and do it. And I thank them for it now. I didn't know that that's what they were doing, but that was their way of teaching me. And so I want to say thank you to my mom and dad for doing that. And, you know, I still remember a lot of the things that they taught me. And I learned from it. So, but there was also something else I was going to mention about one of the things that the most distinguished award that I've ever gotten was being the Red Earth Honored One.
Okay.
And I got nominated, and my brother-in-law is an artist as well as other artists said, Gordon, you're too old. I mean, you're too young. You're too young to get recognized as the honored one. And I thought about that. And then I said, no, look at it this way. I'm the youngest artist to ever receive this award. And I challenge you.
And it's for not just your individual artwork, but also what you've done for the native
My contributions
arts.
to art.
Yeah.
And so I put it back on them.
Yeah.
And so you know, I was the fifth Cheyenne to receive that.
Yeah.
And so to me that was an honor. And to be in the names of Dot Tate Neverquire, Archie Blackcow, Dick West, to be part of that list, it made me feel proud to be Cheyenne, but it also made me proud to be a distinguished artist among that caliber of artists. So always look at things like that from a positive. And now I challenge other young artists. get it. Go ahead and do it.
Okay, you want to tell us the title on this one?
Okay, this is titled Sand Creek. And it was a contemporary painting that I done, and it's at the top represents the before, and then the bottom represents the after. So the before and after is very powerful, very peaceful village, and then it turns to chaos and massacre at the bottom. And I wanted something to express a contemporary view of Sand Creek, an 1864 massacre by Colonel John Shillington, led his troops against a peaceful Cheyenne village with Black Kettle and White Antelope. And so this was my interpretation of that scene. Green represents the life of the Cheyenne. And then of course on that day, the Cheyenne referred to that day as the sky was filled with blood. And then the soldiers burning our village, then I burned the paper on the bottom to highlight the effect of the burning. And the four hands that are mutilated represents the mutilation of the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, but it also reflects one of our traditions. When we lose a loved one, especially the mothers would lose a son in war, she'd cut off her finger. And so that day, a lot of our ancestors' blood was shed. And so I wanted to burn the paper on the bottom, but before I did that, I said a prayer. And I knew that I only had one opportunity to burn. Either it was going to burn too thick or too light. So I prayed before I lit the match. And then I used a big kitchen match. And it came out the way it's supposed to.
Very powerful. And how about this piece, Gordon?
Okay. This is a piece I've done this past year, one of my latest ones. And it depicts the Calumet Lady Chieftains that won the state basketball championship. And they defeated the Surreal Pirates.
Oh.
And so the
Cool.
Calumet Lady Chieftain, she has the war bonnet.
Yeah.
She's got the school colors, and then the horse has got the orange school colors. She's got her Nike moccasins on. And so it was an image that I donated to their fundraiser.
Oh.
And so I wanted to highlight them. And then the dots represent all the team members on the horse.
Great. That's wonderful. And this was one of the pieces, I guess, you had at Southern Plains, is that right?
Yeah, this depicts, I wanted to depict the trade blanket of how the women would always dress themselves around, say, back that time, Benzo Fort, because that's where the original parasols came from.
Right.
And so it reflected that they were all talking Cheyenne to one another. You know, you can just imagine their conversation, but also their parasols of color, you know. They were, it was a social icon of their richness of their ability for their husbands to trade for the parasol. So, and they had to be extraordinary hunters to trade the hides for their things at Benzo Fort. So they're talking, you know, telling stories among one another, and they're Cheyenne women. So that was just kind of something that they're content, they're happy, but they're beautiful.
And the eagle feathers on their parasol.
The eagle feathers. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.